Hello, I'm Hurps, Director of Entrepreneurship for UTS. We have a video series called UTS Startups Confessions that you're watching today. And we talk to entrepreneurs that I respect a lot about what they actually did, what they actually got, and how you, person watching, might be able to follow in their footsteps. Angie, thank you very much for joining today.
Thank you for having me.
It's only entrepreneurs that I respect a lot that we're having on these videos. You're definitely one of those, and you watching, you're going to figure out why through the course of this video. I'm also going to say I've got a little daughter. I love Audrey to death, and what you're working on and what you're actually delivering at scale now is something that I can't imagine her not having, and the whole concept this terrifies me. I'll meander through this, but thank you for what you're doing. To kick off, could you tell me who you were before you started Consent Labs?
So I was a second year university student. I was 19, and I was studying and living on campus at UTS at the time, which was an amazing new experience. You're independent, you're meeting new people, you're going out for the first time, all of which was really cool, but also extremely eye-opening. You're, I think, really having to reckon with sexual harassment and its incredible prevalence in society for the first time on your own. And I was having a lot of conversations with friends, with peers at the time about sexual assault as well, and how common that was on campus. And all of those conversations then led into Consent Labs.
Wow, okay, so there's an opening. So I was going to lead into what are your earliest memories of the idea about this? So obviously a large problem, and a lot of people have seen the data and the surveys around how prevalent it is. I don't think that needs to be established. But how did you think you could solve it?
Yeah, so Consent Labs was really born out of a conversation between myself and my really good friend at the time, Joyce, who's now my co-founder. And we were reflecting on our experiences and our friends' experiences, as I was saying, dealing with sexual harassment and also realizations of sexual assault, experiences with sexual assault, just as two young women, going through university, living on campus, and asking ourselves, why? Why is this so common? Why do we just have to put up with this? Shouldn't we live in a world where this is not acceptable, especially at the prevalence that it currently is? And it all leads back to consent education. That's where it all stems from, and the absolute lack of consent education that Joyce and I personally received was also echoed by a lot of our friends. Consent wasn't introduced, it wasn't touched on at school at all, and I think that is a huge injustice to young people. And so as I sort of started looking into, okay, what exactly is consent, how does it relate to me, I was like, wow, young people really deserve this education proactively, so before they start exploring. I can't believe that schools aren't delivering this already.
Okay. But most people would think that and go, yeah, that kind of sucks. How does that turn into, I'm going to do something about that?
I actually don't really know. Looking back now, I'm amazed that Joyce and I have created a product, a program, an organization that actually makes impact in the world. But I think it really does stem from that personal passion, knowing very clearly what the need is, the need being evidence-based, engaging, inclusive consent education for young people, and knowing that it's not being delivered. It's not being delivered in the school curriculum, it's not being delivered by anyone else on the market, and knowing that if we did it, we could do it really well. So sort of starting to very slowly work towards this big dream that we have, which was delivering inclusive consent education around Australia, just very slowly baby stepping our way up towards that big dream.
Okay, okay, cool. So it's one thing to think, okay, we think we can do better, and knowing that you can do better. How well did you think this would go?
I always had a really clear vision of Consent Labs succeeding. Like there was no doubt in my mind that there was a need for consent education, and that if we were able to get in front of young people, that would be it. Like they would see the value in our program, and it would sort of snowball from there. So I always felt like Consent Labs could succeed and could be national, it could be really big. I think there was a little bit of personal challenge in terms of self-belief, like seeing myself get Consent Labs there, but I always knew that the idea had or could work, and could work really well.
Tell me more about that feeling that you had, and why did you have that feeling of not feeling like you could do it?
I think I had always seen myself on a very traditional career path. I'm quite a risk-averse person, and I went straight from high school to university. I did finance and accounting, which is like a very traditional, safe degree, and got into a grad program at a bank. And so I sort of knew where my life was going. I thought I was just going to progress, up through that bank, and my life was sort of set, and being a risk-averse person, that was fine for me. And so I think the scary part was sort of taking myself from the life path that I thought I would follow into a completely new, quite risky role or job, and believing that I would be able to make it work. That was probably the biggest challenge.
Well, you say risk averse. I think every human is risk averse, at least the ones that are still living. I think it's natural, but somehow you managed to maintain the work you were doing and Consent Labs at the same time.
Yeah.
How were you doing that in terms of, everyone has kind of ideas, but how did you find the time to actually do this?
I think probably because I was risk averse, having a full-time stable job and also being able to do Consent Labs and progress, that was really best of both worlds for me. I don't know if I would have had the guts to be able to launch straight into Consent Labs full-time without a grad job. I probably wasn't ready to take the leap of faith back then. But I think we had that really clear vision of where we wanted Consent Labs to go, and so it was just making those small steps to get to that vision that sort of kept me going.
I love this as a pathway though. I think more people should do it. You see people, I've seen people kind of quit their job and go full-time into something before they have anything developed or any customers or anything else, or people mortgaging their house and doing really extreme risk. It's so much easier. Me. Me too, and not with great results all the time. So I think it makes a lot of sense to step into something slowly and then build as you grow confident. Tell me more about the journey at the start. So say the first year of Consent Labs, what did the work look like for yourself?
So the first year, Joyce and I really spent making sure that there was a need for our product. So we had an idea that consent education was really important, but acknowledging that Joyce and I went to the same high school, we had similar friends, we both identify as Asian, we sort of fit a similar mold, and that the population of Australia is incredibly diverse. Just establishing that there was actually a need for better consent education, and taking a look at what the market looked like at that time. So was consent education already being delivered by someone? Were they doing it really well? And maybe that meant that we wouldn't have to start something from scratch. Maybe we could support someone or let them do their own thing. But the answer to that research was yes, consent education is needed, and no, there's no one else currently doing it. So that really established, okay, this is why we exist, and that's why we're going to dedicate our time to this. And apart from that, the first year was networking, meeting people who worked in education or who worked in sexual health, so experts that sort of like had some sort of degree of knowledge or relation to the field that we wanted to work in, and just getting their thoughts, like, do you think this is needed? How would you best approach this? Who else should we talk to? How should we go about this? Yeah.
In looking around, when you didn't see other providers of this, I've seen some people say that not seeing other people work in a certain market is a sign that you shouldn't enter that market. That other people are not paying for something already, so how are you generating that demand at the start? Was there any concern in your mind that, okay, this doesn't exist, maybe I can't do this?
I mean, a little bit. To a certain degree. I mean, external providers exist in the high school space. You get external providers for every single niche, whether it's like career advisors or a speaker on bullying or cyberbullying. So it's not like that adjacent space doesn't exist. There just wasn't anyone working directly in the field of consent education. And the reason for that was because it was taboo. It was risky. Like, schools didn't want to be engaging in these risky conversations with high school students. And so that was definitely a bit of a leap of faith, or we had to take a leap of faith to, you know, hope that schools would want to have those conversations one day. But the need in terms of from young people was so clear, we hoped that schools couldn't ignore that. And so we decided to continue on.
Well, that's the thing. I think if you are the target market in some ways for this, to the extent that you can represent the demographics that you are, and you see, okay, there's a changing kind of social desire for this kind of training. It's more acceptable to be done inside of schools where previously it might have been taboo. And there's providers out there. This is a proven model of getting something needed quickly into schools that can't be done through curriculum. That sounds pretty perfect in terms of identifying. Yeah,
like there was a relative framework there, and that was, I think, good enough for us at the time.
Okay. Again, I'd be terrified to try and develop this kind of program. How did you go about developing what you ended up offering?
I mean, I was terrified as well, to be honest. It is a really big topic, and so we spent a lot of time researching and educating ourselves, acknowledging that I also didn't get consent education when I was in high school, so I also had to start from scratch. But we place a lot of stock in being evidence-based and being grounded in research. So, you know, doing that research ourselves, making sure that we have connections to people who have expertise in these fields. So whether they have, you know, a relevant legal degree, or whether they work in education or they work in sexual assault services, making sure that we had those relationships with the relevant experts. That was really important to us. But also leveraging our lived experience. As you were saying, we represent this demographic that we want to be speaking to, so we know really intimately we are best placed to answer the questions that they have and know what questions they have. So that's where we sort of started. What are the questions that we had when we were in high school? What would we want answered? And then building on that with tons of evidence and research.
Okay. That's a nice way to develop that, of just finding a lot of people and then using your own filters to figure out who's worth paying attention to and not. Did you find kind of sorting through all the advice and guidance from different people difficult in any way?
Definitely. I mean, especially initially, we were reaching out to so many people to get their thoughts on our approach to this program, and we even had one person say to us, don't do this. This is going to be harmful. Like, you'll do more harm than good.
Hope you're watching.
Which honestly really shook us, because our intent was never to do harm, and we were always really conscious that, you know, this is a really sensitive field, this is a really sensitive topic, and there is opportunity to do harm as opposed to doing good. But I think that caution was actually really good, because it just meant that everything we put out into the market, we backed 100%, because we had done the research, we'd had experts look over it as well and given their endorsement or vetted it, so we were more than comfortable for it to go out. But I think in terms of knowing what advice to take, I think it always comes back to knowing your values and knowing your why. So Consent Labs exists for the empowerment of young people, and that's why we exist. So whenever we get a piece of advice and we wonder, do we take this into account or do we not? It's always measuring it against that why. Like, will it help us achieve our mission and our purpose, or will it lead us further away from it? Like, that's the sort of question that we always ask ourselves.
And it must have been hard, like the first time someone says something like that, and this, over time you figure out, or I figured out in the thing that I did, that if you reach enough people, you reach all the idiots, and sooner or later there's a couple that you just learn to deal with. But if that person was here today, how would you respond to their concern? Because that must be something you run into in dealing with a lot of schools. Every now and then there's someone that just thinks, oh, that's a bit too scary.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it comes back to the research and the evidence base. Like, there is so much research done globally around respectful relationships education that clearly shows that there's a need for it. If you teach a child consent and respectful relationships education, they're actually going to engage in sex at a later age as compared to if you don't give them sex ed. And when they do, they won't take as many risks because they're better informed. And so it's always coming back to that research, which you can't really argue with whenever someone is misinformed or they don't believe in your product. So yeah, that's sort of how we tackle that.
Okay, yeah, that's, I'm seeing your sales process now.
Yeah,
That's,
covering all the bases.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll get to how it's going at the moment, but I'm looking forward to that. If there was a secret recipe to the early success of Consent Labs, what would the ingredients be?
I would say having a co-founder is definitely helpful. I can't imagine doing this without Joyce or doing this without myself. Having someone as that sounding board, someone that you can bounce ideas around with, someone that you can check your values against or your decisions against is like incredibly helpful, as well as just from a motivation point of view. As we were saying before, I was working full time for like 3 years while we were developing Consent Labs, and the last thing that you want to do at the end of a day is come home and write content or respond to emails, but being able to do that alongside someone who makes it fun is the secret sauce, I would say.
Okay, so start a company with Joyce.
Yeah, start it. Exactly. Exactly. Joyce can do it all.
No, that's it's a lonely kind of thing to do. Like when you're trying to figure out a lot of different things, and like you're figuring out literally everything you need to do what you're trying to do. Yeah. To have someone else to keep the motivation up and to share those kind of jobs.
Yeah, exactly. Good. I think sharing the jobs is a really big help. Like Joyce and I have very complementary skill sets. We have different strengths, different weaknesses. So something that I like doing, she doesn't like doing, and that works for us, which is really, really handy. So yeah, having someone that you work well with and that you can be honest with, you share the same values, is really important, and yeah, that was incredibly helpful.
Okay. I know you're a not-for-profit.
Yes.
Why did you choose that model?
It just made sense for us. The way that we operated as a business, as an organisation, was always very values driven. It was always wanting to ensure that consent education was accessible for every single Australian, whether you're in a government school, whether you are regional or rural. It was always about ensuring that consent education was accessible. It wasn't about making money. And so we fit the purpose, the definition of a not-for-profit, and I think it comes with a lot of prestige, good reputation, and so we thought that we would register. Yeah.
Okay. And it's nice to keep things on track as well.
Yeah, yeah. What do you mean by that?
Sorry, that probably didn't make sense on its own. Because by saying we are a not-for-profit that's doing X and we exist for these objects, the permanence that can give something. Because while you're there and while choice is there, it's going to keep doing what it's doing.
Yeah.
But in a company structure that says we are going to do this, hopefully that persists as well. And other people can know they're joining something that's just trying to solve this problem.
Exactly. I think it gives everyone a really clear purpose, a really clear mission. And as I was saying before, that is really important to us. Like whenever we are making a decision about, what market do we want to go after, what decision do we want to make, it's always measured against our mission. So yeah, it felt really natural for us to be a not-for-profit. We weren't really changing our mode of operations or the way that we worked.
Okay, makes sense. Okay, it's been 5 years since you started. What does Consent Labs look like today?
Consent Labs has reached over 10,000 students in Australia in 2021 across 6 different states and territories, which was way more of an impact than I ever really let myself believe. Like 10,000 is a lot of people, and we are now a team of about 50 or 60 people, which is honestly mind-blowing. I can't believe that this many young people care about consent and want to work with me. Is just crazy.
Crazy is the wrong word. But it's just nice to see it hitting that kind of scale. That's incredible. And in 5 years as well, that might sound like a decent amount of time, but like to grow to that scale in a education market like Australia, that's incredible.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the craziest thing about it is that growth really only happened over the last year and a half. We grew really fast. It was like very slow and just Joyce and myself for a very long time, and then it sort of just spiked. But I only see that continuing really. Like 10,000 students is nowhere near the amount of students in Australia, and every single one of them need consent education. So onwards and upwards.
I was going to ask what the future looks like, but it sounds pretty clear.
Yeah, so being able to reach more students is our overarching goal, but like I was saying before, being able to make sure that consent education is accessible, and it's also really tailored. So right now we deliver to mainstream high schools, but our goal for the next few years is being able to reach more regional and rural students who don't get this sort of education, being able to deliver education programs that are tailored to at-risk groups. So for example, people with intellectual disabilities, making sure that a program that is really relevant and tailored to them is really important. So yeah, ensuring that consent education is accessible for every single group in Australia is our goal.
Can't. Okay, so everyone watching this video needs, I think, to think about how they can help that to happen. What are the helpful things that people can do or might be able to do at home?
I mean, as I was saying, we're always looking to reach more students, but we also deliver to parents and to teachers. They're really important stakeholders in a young person's life and how they understand, relationships in the world. And I think they also really need to be empowered in consent education. So if you fit that bill, so if you're a young person, if you're a parent, or if you're a teacher, come to Consent Labs. You can receive some consent education. But yeah, I think it's really about, being able to reach more young people. That's ultimately what we want to do.
Okay, so this search for Consent Labs, or hit the link in the bottom of this video.
Yep.
Tell your school.
Yep.
Tell teachers tell...
your uni.
Yeah.
Yep.
We'll tell UTS. I'm sure UTS is already doing it. But we'll make sure we spread it around too. I think compared to that person, the idiot from 4 years ago that was saying, oh, what if this or what if that? When you have 10,000 people a year going through this and having great experiences, that's a much easier thing to spread around.
Yeah, definitely.
I think your next couple of years are going to be ridiculous.
I hope so.
Which brings me to my last couple of questions. That is incredible. But what does it look like for yourself as an entrepreneur now? What has the last 5 years as an entrepreneur done to you?
I think it's taught me a lot about self-belief and being able to value myself. Being able to build something from scratch, being able to pitch and sell to customers was a really steep learning curve. I'm not naturally someone who likes to put myself out there. And Joyce and I really struggled with being able to value or to price our program. I think we started at something ridiculous like $2 a student or something like that, which is not feasible at all. But it was a learning curve. Like you learn from every single experience, every single meeting you have, or every single pitch you have. And like as a result, I think your self-belief sort of improves or increases. Yeah.
I always used to feel like I didn't know what I was trying to do at every single point as an entrepreneur.
Definitely. There were so many points where, you question yourself, like, am I the right person to do this? Are we making the right move? Is this the right decision? But I think, again, having that co-founder there is always really helpful to be able to be your cheerleading squad when you need that, or be able to go into big pitch meetings together and tackle that with someone else is really, really helpful.
Well, you're obviously the right person to run this company, but it takes a while to realize.
It does.
It's been interesting in what you've done that everything has been consistent.
Yeah.
Like you started for a reason,
Yeah.
you've grown being consistent with that reason, and now you can look around and see that reason being achieved all over the place. Do you think that was, if you could go back and talk to yourself from 5 years ago, maybe you don't need to reinforce that. Maybe that's something that was already in you as a person. But for other entrepreneurs out there, do you think that's advice they need to take?
Yeah, I think knowing your why is the most important piece. It's what is going to sustain you when there are challenging times, or when you're not sure, or when you're not sure of the decision that you're making. I think always coming back to your why and being really clear on that is your saving grace. That is what is going to lead you through all of that doubt, or even all of that self-doubt. And also surrounding yourself with a team who also really believe in that why, and being able to lean on a really diverse team of diverse skill sets, but also diverse people who, like I said, all believe in that same why and are working towards that mission with you.
Okay, sounds pretty good. Not to rubbish banks or anything, but a career stuck in a bank, kind of working out the things compared to learning everything, proving you can do everything, being driven by a mission that you care about a lot, and now seeing 10,000 people last year, and God knows how many this year and in the years ahead, have what you didn't have and what I didn't have. That sounds pretty good.
Yeah, it's pretty surreal. It is honestly pretty surreal that I find myself sitting here with you and talking about all the achievements that we've had with Consent Labs and the growth that we see with Consent Labs. But it all really does come back to that why, and wanting something better for the next generation of young people.
Okay, cool. So think about your why. A person watching this video after you tell everyone you know about Consent Labs, just Google it or follow the link below. Angie, thank you so much for joining me today. That's been incredible, and I look forward to seeing everything that Consent Labs does from here. It's going to be amazing, because it's been amazing every step of the way along for the last 5 years.
Yeah.
So thank you for doing it, and I look forward to seeing what's coming up.
Thanks so much, Murray. It's been so much fun.
Thank you.